the Clinton Foundation, her tenure at the State Department.
The Clinton Foundation, to me, is a racketeering enterprise, and the State Department was a pay-for-play organization.
The Clinton Foundation is a fraud.
That's classic pay-to-play.
She did favors for those very people who gave money to the Clinton Foundation.
I think it's a racketeering enterprise.
I would probably indict the Clinton Foundation as a racketeering enterprise.
Turning the State Department into a pay-for-play operation.
Well, that was Rudy Giuliani during the campaign. Now he's a leading contender for her job as Secretary of State and facing tough questions himself. The question tonight for senior investigative correspondent Drew Griffin is there any actual substance to them? Drew, what have you learned?
There seems to be, Anderson. You know, he became America's mayor on September 11, 2001. He credited with keeping New York together on a path to healing in those final months of his term as mayor. But once out of the mayor's office, Rudy Giuliani became very rich, giving speeches worldwide, setting up a law practice and a consulting firm, and doing business around the globe. Some of that business involved questionable actors in foreign countries that could now come back to haunt him if he should be chosen as the nominee here, Anderson. We've been digging into the list of contracts tied to Giuliani. They are extensive. One matter that it's already haunted him back in 2007 when he ran for president, what his critics call a link between the state-run Venezuelan oil company and Giuliani's law firm. That client was Citgo Oil in Texas. It's a subsidiary of the oil company owned by Venezuela. It's come up before. It's going to come up again. He'll also likely be criticized because of his work for the government of Qatar, which hired Giuliani to help with intelligence security. His former law firm also had offices in the United Arab Emirates, worked on financial deals for Middle Eastern nations like Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Oman. Giuliani's law firm, Anderson, was massive. Hundreds of attorneys employed across the U.S. and the world. And among the contracts they had, he was hired to combat crime in Mexico City, El Salvador, Colombia, Chile. He signed on to help political candidates in Ukraine and the Dominican Republic. It adds up to a lot of relationships. Some countries who aren't always on the best terms with the United States. It also added up to tens of millions of dollars in fees for Rudy Giuliani.
Can a Secretary of State come into office with all those former business deals around the world?
You know, it is the biggest strike against Giuliani right now, and some of it coming from Republicans. This is what Senator Rand Paul said earlier today.
Well, I think it is worrisome, some of the ties to foreign governments, because that was a big complaint about many of us with Hillary Clinton and her ties and the money she received from foreign governments. So whether or not you have divided loyalty, obviously, is very important.
The other big problem Giuliani may have, Anderson, is over the Iraq War. Giuliani, of course, supported it. Donald Trump famously campaigned that he did not. Moving forward, will these two men see eye to eye on foreign policy that Giuliani would be asked to carry out? Anderson?
Bringing the panel, they've all been carefully vetted by our transition team, Atlantic contributor Peter Beinart, Aussie.com editor-in-chief Carlos Watson, Sirius XM host and Republican consultant Margaret Hoover, Trump supporter Jeffrey Lord, and Democratic strategist Paul Begala. Margaret, what about these Giuliani business ties? I mean, a lot of people have business ties around the world. Is it a problem?
Look, I think I have a hard time with the apples-to-apples comparison with the Clintons. I mean, the hit against Hillary Clinton when she was running for president is that as Secretary of State, her husband was taking donations for their family foundation from foreign governments, okay? I think that is a clear conflict of interest. Is clearly problematic. It would be problematic if Rudy, as Secretary of State, were somehow continuing to have business deals with foreign governments. But there's no indication. I mean, clearly that would cross the line. That would be improper. That would represent conflicts of interest potentially, and you don't want that. Okay?
Is that a problem for Donald Trump and his family to have business dealings overseas?
Yes, yes. That is going to be
that seems like
very
something
clear,
they do have and will.
This is something that they are going to have to unravel. They apparently are looking at it, but it is something that I come from a tradition of Boy Scouts on this. My great-grandfather Herbert Hoover actually turned every gift he got as president back over to the government, believing it was a gift to the American people before that was even legislated. Okay, before they had to by law. That is the law. Anything. So there is a lot that's going to have to be unraveled and worked out on the Trump team. But when it comes to Rudy, I don't see any reason why he couldn't be Secretary of State so long as he doesn't have any contemporary or current ties or business relationships with
Carlos,
foreign
do you see an ongoing problem?
I think a number of countries have been raised, Venezuela, Qatar. I think the real problem could come if there's serious issues with Iran. You heard how strong Trump was during the campaign, talking about the Iranian deal. I think if there's real problems, even if it's just appearance-wise. I think that'll be difficult. But the reality is Donald Trump's win was so unexpected that he's got a lot more flexibility. He owes very few people, and so if he decides to take a risk on behalf of Rudy Giuliani, the reality is he'll have more flexibility than Barack Obama or George W. Bush would have had.
The other question, Jeffrey, is, it's at this point for President-elect Trump, it's about expending political capital. Every decision he makes expends a little bit, and he's got to pick and choose where he wants to expend that capital.
This is the way of the world. I mean, the only thing, as I said to somebody in the Trump circle, I said the only thing worse than losing is winning. And remembering, as I do, the Reagan situation, you got immediately into a situation where you had Reagan loyalists. I mean, this is very similar to this situation. People who were loyal to Ronald Reagan forever and a day. They were very anti-establishment and the establishment of the day. And if you were a Bush person, you were suspect, and he was the vice president. And so there is this to be expected here. I don't really see anything different. He is going to expend political capital. He will find ways, particularly being Donald Trump, to use the presidency to gain some.
It is interesting, though, Paul. I mean, obviously, there's the irony of Giuliani's criticism of Hillary Clinton, and here now people are raising this question about him. But for anybody who's been in business life or government life, there's going to be red flags.
Absolutely.
I mean, you look at Newt Gingrich, who has a whole business. There's talking about Clinton Inc. There's Newt Inc., which has a lot of. Probably might raise questions for him as well.
Rudy has been spending this time raising millions of dollars to help poor people in Africa fight off AIDS. Oh, no, that's the Clinton Foundation, unfairly maligned a moment ago by Margaret. It is apples to oranges.
Everything I said was true.
It is apples to oranges because what Rudy's got are these business entanglements now that are going to be hard to unwind, and so does President-elect Trump. The thing about political capital, though, is he should be gaining political capital from his appointments. George W. Bush, elected in a very contentious election, right? Country very divided. He brought Colin Powell in as Secretary of State. Even the most partisan Democrat had to say, okay, that's a revered figure. I'm really honored and proud that a man like that wants to serve in the Bush administration. These are the sorts of signals that President-elect Trump needs to be sending. Honestly, I like Rudy. He's a very able guy, but somebody's putting this out, by the way. Can I take you behind the scenes? And it ain't the Democrats. Okay? The campaign is about screwing your enemies.
Somebody is putting it out that Rudy Giuliani has business.
Somebody inside Trump land is stabbing Rudy in the back. The campaign is about screwing your enemies. The transition is about screwing your friends. And Rudy is being screwed by his friends right now.
Welcome to Washington.
Yeah.
Peter, I mean, how do you see this transition?
I mean, beyond these ethical questions, the question is, first of all, Donald Trump, maybe his biggest foreign policy attack on Hillary Clinton was her support for the Iraq War and his supposed opposition to the Iraq War, right? Here's a guy who ran against lobbyists and now has lobbyists throughout his transition, ran against the Iraq War, brought a fervent supporter of the Iraq War, supposedly now, to be a Secretary of State. So it does raise the question of whether Donald Trump actually believes in any of this stuff. The second question is, what qualifies Rudy Giuliani to be Secretary of State? I can see, okay, Attorney General, maybe at least he's been in law enforcement. He's never been a diplomat. He was a mayor. Yes, he did rally the country and the city to some degree after 9/11, but that's not foreign policy. He's now been a security consultant dealing with terrorism, I guess, homeland security. But is there anything in his record that actually shows that he's dealt with the panoply of issues that you have to deal with as Secretary of State, especially when you have a president who's as ill-informed as Donald Trump and desperately needs somebody who has that background?
Margaret?
Look, Peter raises a very fair point that a lot of Republicans are raising now, too. Right. I mean, there's the National Review is saying the same as much. Richard Lowry, the head of National Review, tweeted the same thing today. I mean, this is, as Paul says, this is a fight on the Republican side about who's going to be the best Republican to serve Donald Trump.
But the reality is it's not really even a fight because Trump won, as he said, unshackled by Paul Ryan and all the other classic Republican support. And so I think it's clear that absent there being some real criminal misdoing or something that looks so bad that he thinks it's going to meaningfully retard his efforts, he's going to take his chances. He's going to be unconventional. Why would he stop now?
But it is interesting how it seems how important loyalty is to Donald Trump.
Yes.
And I mean, we've seen this time and time again. We learned this on the campaign trail. But we're seeing it. I mean, Rudy Giuliani was an early backer of Donald Trump. And part of any transition is rewarding those people who have been loyal, whether it's good or not.
There is nothing unusual here about what's going on. Donald Trump is in the moment of putting his stamp on the government of the United States. It's going to be a Trump government. That's the way it works. As the old saying from the Andrew Jackson days goes, to the winner goes the spoils. This is how it works.
What do you make of Kushner, the stories now that Kushner is sort of at the center of a lot of this infighting, that some people describe things as a knife fight. There's clearly, a purging of Chris Christie or his supporters.
That out too. I've never met Jared Kushner, and I really hate going after family. Right, I don't. Those kids are impressive. I'm sure the son-in-law is very impressive. They're successful. Now, they're not children. They're the adult children who are now assuming real power and influence, and so I suppose that makes him a target. But I'm not ready to cast stones at him, and this is clearly coming from inside Trump land. People are attacking the president-elect's son-in-law.
How common is that in a transition at this stage?
Never happened. Nobody
never
was
happened.
Attacking Bobby Kennedy when JFK was bringing him into the government. That was a different era. But he's got two jobs, the president-elect. He needs to unite our country and staff his government. And he can do both with some of those staffing. That's why Colin Powell is the gold standard. Or President Reagan, who you served, reaching out to James Baker, his opponent.
I just want to, can I respond to something that Jeffrey said, this claim that to the winner goes the spoils? That's not actually the way our political system works. These positions have to be confirmed by the Senate, right? We have three branches of government, and what we have to hope and pray, given that Republicans control everything, is that we have more people like Rand Paul who are actually asking tough questions about whether Rudy Giuliani is qualified to be Secretary of State. Because I think most Republicans, if you gave them a truth serum, would say, no way in heck is he qualified to be Secretary of State, no matter how loyal he was to Donald Trump.
I do know Jared Kushner, and I think he's terrific. And the way I can see this working out to model the Reagan Troika is that Reince Priebus has the Jim Baker role, Steve Bannon has the Ed Meese role, and Jared Kushner has the Mike Deaver role, because he personally is very close to the family, and he understands Donald Trump's interests, and he's loyal to